transport. Now let's talk about actual application. So there's something called digoxin. So digoxin is a chemical. It's actually is a natural product. It's derived from this plant. I don't think it really grows here in Hawaii, but I saw that all the time. I saw this everywhere in Ireland and England. It even grows in the wild. It's called foxglove, and I think part of the scientific name of it is digitalis. So this is a natural product derived from the foxglove plant. So the thing is that digoxin is also used to treat cardiac conditions such as atrial fibrillation and heart arrhythmias. So what does digoxin do? What does it do to the heart, and what does it do to cardiac muscle to help to treat this atrial fibrillation or arrhythmias? So these abnormal contractions of the heart. More in MD2. Okay, so the thing about digoxin, so remember primary active transport, the sodium potassium exchange pump is a form of primary active transport because it requires ATP to do its functions. So the thing is that, again, you have 3 sodium being pumped out via ATP. Per ATP, you have 3 sodium being pumped to the outside and 2 potassium being brought toward the inside. Okay, so the thing about digoxin, it's actually an inhibitor of this pump. So by inhibiting this pump, you can no longer pump sodium towards the outside, and you can't bring potassium in. So what's going to happen to the cell if this sodium-potassium exchange pump is blocked with digoxin? Well, the thing is that if you can't pump out that sodium, and you can't use this active transport, is remember, this machinery is being gummed up. The intracellular concentration of sodium is going to increase. So now you have accumulation of sodium ions inside of the cell because, again, this route out is being blocked via digoxin. Now, this goes in hand with the sodium-calcium exchanger. So remember the sodium-calcium exchanger, typically you have, in a typical resting cell without digoxin, more sodium on the outside than inside. So the concentration gradient is being used to drive the sodium-calcium exchanger to use the energy from sodium and then pump out calcium to the extracellular fluid. Now, this is the funny and cool thing about the sodium-calcium exchanger. If you have more sodium on the inside of the cell, it can run in reverse. So it's not a one-way street. It's not one direction. It depends on whether you have more sodium on the extracellular fluid or in the intracellular fluid. If there's more sodium in the intracellular fluid, this will run in reverse. So now you have sodium being diffused, or actually like facilitated diffusion into the outside, or actually, can I use that term? Yeah, but just like sodium is flowing toward the outside, but now it's bringing in calcium due to the increased sodium from blocking the sodium-potassium pump. So more sodium being in the cell is now flowing to the outside while bringing in calcium. So if you've taken A and P before or any sort of cell biology, thing is that you've probably heard of actin and myosin. What ion is needed for actin and myosin to bind? You need calcium. Calcium binds to troponin, which moves away tropomyosin from actin, allowing actin and myosin to bind and contract. So when you have more calcium entering and being retained in the cytoplasm of the cell, it causes increased contraction force and contractility. So what does that mean if you have a heart condition? Well, if you have increased calcium, that means stronger contractions due to having more calcium inside of the cardiomyocyte or heart muscle cell. So this is, again, digoxin, to recap, blocks that sodium-potassium pump. So this causes an increase in intracellular and sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium. Again, more in MD2 if you want to learn all about that, or you will have to learn about that. But due to that sodium-calcium exchanger and that increased intracellular sodium, this brings more calcium in through that exchanger. More calcium means stronger contractions. And the thing about this was widely prescribed for AFib and arrhythmia, but now they're looking at the long-term effects. It works in the short term, but what if someone's constantly prescribed digoxin and over a long period of time? Now they're starting to say, like, hey, is this a bad thing to take in the long run? Is this actually causing more harm if the person is on digoxin for years versus like using it to rescue someone from transient from atrial fibrillation?